Good morning, Flosstube. Jan Hicks of Jan Hicks Creates here, coming to you on Thursday, September 13th at 10:22 in the morning. It is a cloudy day here in Maryland, but luckily I don't think we are going to be getting any of the hurricane. So I am very thankful for that, and equally keeping in mind all of those who are going to be in Florence's path. It's going to be a rough few days for quite a few people here in the southeastern U.S. Just realized yesterday that Weeks Dye Works is located in North Carolina, so I hope they are staying safe and will not be affected too much by Miss Florence. So today I wanted to do a little bit of a Stitch With Me video, but also a little bit of a tutorial on the sewing method. On my video that I did the other day showing you how I manage the fabric, I got questions about how you handle the direction of the stitches when you're stitching each stitch individually, each X individually. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about that today, and then we'll just see how far we go with this. I am working on Woolemina, Plum Street Samplers Woolemina, part of her Jack's Sweet Shop design. This was one of my Stitch Mania starts. I haven't picked it up since then. I'm using, probably none of the called for colors. Well, the DMCs I'm probably using. Some of the DMCs. Probably all of the DMCs that are called for, but none of the classic color works. You can see there for pine needles, I've written in either Endive or Piney Woods. That's what I'm currently using. I am using the Endive from Gentle Art Sampler Threads. It's a gorgeous green. Lots of nice variegation in this one. So I am stitching each X individually. And so the question I got was, how do you handle making each X individually when you're doing the sewing method? Where do you go down? Where do you go up? That kind of thing. Now let me start by saying I always make my X's so that the lower, let me do one. The lower leg is going from bottom left to top right. Like so. Bottom left to top right, and the upper leg then goes from, well, I'm not going to say bottom and top because that is immaterial to the way I do this. It's slanting from left to right. The top leg is slanting from right to left. I guess I do have to say bottom top. You saw, right? That way and that way for the bottom leg, that way for the top leg, yeah? So when I'm stitching, I also want to say that I am by no means an expert. I do it the way I think is right. I do it the way that works for me. I am also not a perfectionist. Now, having said that, I think I do a pretty darn good job. I'm not sloppy. I care about how my work looks, but it's not like every single X is absolutely perfect and that I fuss over it, and that I fuss over it to get it perfect. I'll fuss with them a little bit if they're too weird looking, but for the most part, I think they land pretty nicely when I'm doing this. So currently, as you can see, I'm working from right to left. And this is an easier way to do it. So because my legs are slanting, the bottom one is going from the bottom left to top right, and the top one from bottom right to top left. So let me see how to explain this. You can see I'm ready to complete the top leg and of this stitch and start the bottom leg of the next stitch. So I've already brought my thread up, my floss up through the bottom right, excuse me, itchy nose, up through the bottom right. So I go down through the top left and then swing my needle under and come up through the bottom left. And this is when I'm working from right to left. So now it's on the bottom left. I do the normal kind of up and down, going down through the upper right, up through the bottom right. Swing that, and then finish it off in the top left, bottom left, top right, bottom right. And I believe this kind of has a swing to it once you get that motion down. Like I said, this going this way is easier. It's not any awkward hand angles. This is definitely the most comfortable for me, I think, probably for most right-handed dominant people. And of course, this is just when I'm going in a straight line. You'll see my thumbnail here kind of pushes down as the needle's swinging up to help separate the linen threads to make it easier for my needle to go through. I have my middle finger underneath and my needle is bouncing off of that. I never really pierce it or anything, of course. And I try when I'm bringing my needle back up through, my thumb also is manipulating the fabric so that I'm separating the stitches that are already there a bit so my needle doesn't pierce them. Does that mean I never pierce them? No, it doesn't. I do my best. It's not perfect. Now, with variegated threads, I don't often go back and forth. I think before I start of the look I want. And I've talked about this before. You'll see on this piece, she definitely went back and forth, whoever the stitcher was. And it actually looks like there's either a big area of dark in the floss that she used, or she deliberately ended with dark, started with dark to keep the dark in the middle. Don't know how she did it, but there was definitely some back and forth motion. I, per usual, don't want that kind of, I want it to be more of a modeled, flowy, organic look than that. And because of that, I do have a tendency to go diagonal this way, just to move the colors around more. So now I'm going to show you how I work diagonally, and then I will show you how I work from left to right. Excuse me, frog in my throat. All right, so I'm up here ready to go down through the upper left of this one that I just stitched. Now, I could go down right down here. So I'm moving to diagonally down to this stitch right here next to the pink one here. And I could go down here to the upper right corner and do that. And then I'd go across. So this is basically just forming the X as normal, as I think of it. All right, and then down. But when I do that, if I wanted to keep with that kind of flow, then I would go across to get into the upper right corner of the next one, going down diagonally. Diagonal across the square bottom left. Whoops. Top left. I'm trying to push that fabric down, as you can see, so I can get my needle in there without piercing the other strands that are already there. But what I like to do, I find it more comfortable to work with my needle coming towards me, working down across the fabric rather than up. So I try to do that as often as possible. So again, I'm going to go diagonal over to this stitch here. So I take and come down to the bottom left. That means I'm going to go down through the top right and down and up through the bottom right. So you can see I'm coming with the needle down towards me. And again, well, now I'm going straight down. Down bottom left and up down through the top right and up through the bottom right and down. Now I'm going to show you going from left to right. This is definitely the more awkward angle. What I like to do, the way I think of it and the way I remember, is when I'm going towards the right, I bring my needle up in the upper right corner of the next stitch. And now I'll show you why. So I've come up in the upper right corner. I'm going down in the lower left, of course, up in the upper left, and down in the lower right. And so then I swing my needle around and go up again in the upper right, lower left to upper left. Oh shoot, I'm sorry, just bumped you. Down in the lower right, up again in the upper right. Now I think you can see just from my stitching this that it is a slower way for me to work, just because there is a bit of an awkward angle. And I'm actually going to do a stab and poke here because it's awkward enough that it's easier for me to do the stab and poke to make sure I don't catch any of those threads on those pink stitches. And that's something to keep in mind too. It's not like I exclusively only do the sewing method. I go back and forth as needed to make it work. Okay, so over here, I'm still continuing to the right. I'm going to show you what happens if I switch that around, and instead of going up through the upper right like I had been doing, I'm going to go up through the lower left. So then down, upper right, up, lower right. And you would think, well, that's good because that's the way you like it. You have your needle coming towards you and that's more comfortable for me. Well, that part definitely is. But now when I get to the upper left, my choices of coming back up again are either, in order to keep my orientation correct, right, are either to come up through the lower left here, or try and swing around and come up through the upper right. And you can see either one of these, certainly trying to come up through the next upper right on the next stitch, you can see how my hand is having to bend around and do this kind of crazy angle. That just doesn't work. Now I could come up through the bottom left, this is true, but I have my floss there and I kind of have to fish it out of the way and make sure I don't pierce it. So again, you can see that it's just a more awkward way of doing things. So let me stick that back down there in the upper left, and then use the stabbing method to come up again in the way I like, which is going up through the upper right. And then I'll just continue on. And again, using the nail of my left hand thumb to manipulate the fabric so it makes it easier. Now, because I don't like going in straight lines, if I don't have to, for variegated floss, I'm going to start moving up. So I'm going to move up at a diagonal. And again, I could certainly go straight up here. And I think I have a cat crawling in a box, so excuse the background noise. I can go straight up here and then down. And, you know, it's easier over here since I have no other stitches already done. But again, I get here, and I have to either come to this hole or to this hole, right, to make start my X to do my bottom leg. And so if I'm doing it this way, I'm putting my needle down through the upper left, and I have to swing my hand at an awkward angle to try and reach. And you know, you can do it, but the idea of doing the sewing method is to speed you up. So I either have to resort to poking and stabbing again to get me oriented correctly, and again I go then up to the upper right. Come across, bottom left, upper left, and so this time then, instead of what I did on that other one that ended up being awkward for the next one, I had gone down here and come up here. Instead, I'm going to go down the bottom right, come up to the next one, upper right, and that makes everything flow much easier from there. So I'm kind of going across two stitches to start the next one, the upper right of the next one. All right, so now I want to show you going up and down. Now, excuse me, I'm going to get a drink of water. Now, I do not know whether there's a rule that says you must always go in this direction. If there is, I ignore it. I go in whatever direction I feel I need to for most efficient use of floss to get the flow of the colors that I want and to get me to the next place I need to be. So those are all the things I take into consideration. So I don't care whether I go left to right, right to left, up, down, diagonal. My stitches all end up looking the same, so I figure it's all good to me. So I'm going to show you going down. So I'm going to go down this line right here, this line of stitches. So when I'm going down, I like to start in the lower left, come across, upper right, lower right, upper left, and then I drop down to the bottom left of the next stitch, upper right, bottom right, top left, and then drop down again, bottom left of the next stitch. Use my thumb to manipulate the fabric to open up those holes a little more. And again, when there's not any other stitches around, it's definitely easier. And you can see that this gets a pretty good flow going. I also use my thumb a bit. I don't know whether you noticed that there. Let me do it again. My floss sometimes gets in the way of the holes, and I will also see how the floss is kind of crossing over there. I'll also use my thumb sometimes to push the floss up out of the way so it's not getting caught in the needle or anything. I think you can see that that's pretty fast. And you know, again, this is one of the times that it gets faster because I'm coming down towards me. I have no other stitches in the way, so I can pick up a pretty good speed. Now, going up, it's basically the same. I'm going to get started here, going back up. So I'm starting in the upper right to go up to bottom left, bottom right, and then I go up to the next, where I'm going to place my next X, and again, top right, bottom left, top left, bottom right, top right. And so I'm going in a line. In this particular instance on the back, I'm just going to have lines going up and down. So I hope that helps. You know, for me, it's all about how I'm manipulating where I'm going as far as which holes I'm going up and down in, so that my hand is never at a strange angle to catch those holes. Does that make sense? And on the back, let me just poke that in there. On the back, you'll see So here's the up and down, and it's kind of doubled here in the middle where two lines have overlapped. But then, let's see if you can see this with this light. The light's pretty crappy today. You can see here it's kind of shining. Well, trying to get a good one that you can really see on camera. I think you can see here that there's the cross line. Whenever you're doing single crosses like this, you're going to end up quite often with a line of thread going across your stitches in the back, because that's where you're, crossing across to come up or down in the hole that you want. I don't know whether that makes sense or not. But anyway, so I'm going to continue on up here. So, I hope that was useful. Again, let me know if you have any other questions, if any of this did not make sense. And you can see, okay, so I'm getting to a spot where I have stitches on all sides. Not ideal, but not a big deal. I'm not going to do the sewing method here. I'm going to do the stab and poke, because that way I can be totally sure that I'm not accidentally catching any of the fibers from any of the other stitches. And that's laying nicely in there. And then let's see, I'm going to jump over here. Whoops, I was totally off camera for that. I'm sorry. I just finished this one in here just by doing the stab and poke. So I'm going to jump over here and fill in the grass around these flowers. So anyways, hope that was useful. I'm going to keep stitching here and talking a little bit. Just doing a little stitch with me now. And there I totally did something different from what I told you before. Mostly because I didn't want to come up. So normally I would have come up here in the upper right and down there. But, yeah, totally screwed myself up that time. And over here I'm actually going to do that as well. And this is because I didn't want to try and come up here because there's already 3 stitches completing that hole. And it just makes it harder to do the sewing method when there's already a bunch of stitches. I'll just stab and poke those. It makes it easier, less to worry about. You want to try and go, when you have 3 stitches coming together, I don't know, I assume people know this, but you never know. I know there's a lot of newbies out there. When you have all the other stitches already coming together in a hole, you want to try and come up in a hole where there isn't as many stitches. Ideally, you would want to come up in a hole where there's none. But I don't know about you, but that's not how I stitch. And go down in the holes where there's more already coming together. Sometimes that's impossible when you're doing this and filling in, and that's fine. You just be more careful. But for the most part, you want to, kind of a basic rule of thumb is you come up in holes that have less stitches in them and go down into holes that have more stitches already in them. Now I paused here because I want to show you. So I need to fill in these 2, right? I also need to come over here to these ones and then come down here and fill in this blank. So instead of so I'm finishing up this X here. Instead of doing the one next to it next, I'm going to come down to the one down here, do that one, and then do that one, because then I can just jump diagonally here and then here. It's not like I'm using up a whole lot of floss to do it this way, or if I wanted to just do it the opposite way. But I do try and conserve every once in a while, because this floss isn't cheap. And we need to conserve wherever we can, right? Okay, so there, you just saw me struggling a bit, trying to get my needle up in there and not pierce any of the other ones. I almost did stab and poke, but that time it worked. My rule of thumb is if I try and get the needle up through a hole and it's taking longer than it would if I just, to manipulate it doing the sewing method, than it would to stab and poke, then I'll just stop and I'll stab and poke. And that's what I'm just going to do through here, so I'm not fighting with all the other flosses coming up here. Speaking of expenses, the new expensive items, the new iPhones were announced yesterday. Mike and I haven't upgraded our iPhones since the 6s. I have a 6 Plus, or we both have 6 Pluses. These iPhones are getting so expensive. Not like they weren't expensive before, but holy cow. I would love to upgrade, if only to get a nicer camera for all that I'm doing with these videos and, of course, all my photos, especially once we get to Hawaii. I'm going to be taking so many photos. I have a cat down here who's probably going to be getting into trouble, which probably means that his food bowl is empty. Because cats, kitty awake, kitty hungry. Cross Stitch with Luda showed her Saju scissors. These are mine. Very pointy. Pretty S for Saju on them. These are ones that actually the owner of the yarn store, A Good Yarn, where I used to work, this was her Christmas Hanukkah present to us last year? No, not last year. I wasn't there last year. The year before. She had gotten a bunch of them, and so we all got to pick which ones we really liked. All right, so got to start a new thread. Another thing I wanted to tell you, so you guys know the Gentle Arts threads come pre-cut in 1 yard lengths, as do the Victorian Motto. They come pre-cut. I very rarely, never say never, right? I very rarely use them in those lengths. Sometimes I do. But for the most part, I will take those lengths and cut them in half. So I'm using 18-inch lengths. And one thing, oh shoot, I'm sorry. Just really whacked you that time. Itchy nose. One thing that I wanted to tell you what I do, so I have the 2 separate lengths here, right? But the variegation goes across the whole 36-inch 1 yard length. So what I do when I'm pulling out a new thread, I take turns pulling out my threads from the 2 halves. So you can see I've already used up three of that half, so it's this one's turn. So that way I make sure that all of the variegation is showing up in the stitching. I could use up all the threads from the one side first, but then I'd only get whatever variegation is showing up on that side of that yard of floss. And so I try and spread it out a little bit so everything's represented there. Okay. So yeah, the new iPhones. When we start working, notice it's always the royal we, when Mike starts working at the job in Hawaii, there is a nice big bonus incentive chunk of money that he gets for, that any civilian employee gets for taking the job out there. Oh shoot, I just pulled that totally out. We don't know when that chunk of money comes, whether it's at the beginning of it's an annual bonus, so we don't know whether it's at the beginning of the year or the end of the year. But whenever it is, I think I would like to use part of that to upgrade my phone. We'll see if we can get Mike on board with that. But it's time, like I said, we both have 6s. It's time to upgrade, in my humble opinion. I think I can convince him, since I use it so much for these videos and for the pictures I'm sharing in the videos. All of that. there are 3 different versions now. The most expensive with all the fanciest doodads, I think, goes up to, like, the biggest capacity is like 1,500. Yeah, that's just insane for a phone. But Apple, right? So yeah, he finally did get a little bit more progress on the move. He finally got assigned a desk officer. Hold on, time for a drink. He did get assigned a desk officer, which means the paperwork flow is starting, which means the testing will be starting. And it also means that his boss out there, she had asked him when he finds out who his desk officer is to let her know so she can sit on him so we can get out there as quickly as possible. So we don't have a timeline yet. No orders yet. The orders don't come until, like, Mike has to have a medical test, a psych eval. He has to take another polygraph. So all the basic stuff that has to happen in order for a person to get hired at NSA, they have to go through again anytime they get a job posting somewhere. So my understanding is orders don't come until all of that nonsense is done. That nonsense, from what we understand, can take 6 to 8 weeks. I'm not sure why, but I think that's the stuff that his boss out there wants to sit on this person for, and to get things scheduled and get them done. Because really, you could do all that testing in one day. I mean, it doesn't take that long to do all these different evals. So you can see I'm just bouncing around here on this fabric. I know I have to fill all of this mound of grass in. I did the flowers here, so I can just go around them off to take care and see where the mound ends down here. There's also a heart on the other side, but I'll get this side done first. So anyways, what else is happening? I guess part of the fun of all this is, you know, as I've said before, sorting through stuff and moving, and we're going to be getting rid of some stuff. I mean, we've already gotten rid of so much stuff in these past couple moves that we don't have a whole lot to get rid of. We are hoping to know, I think I mentioned this on the last video that I did with Kelly, we want to have a time frame before we hit the road to take the RV out to Arizona, so we know if we can pack our winter gear up or not. The other conundrum I've been dealing with, though, as I spend time out in the RV, is always stuff. Always stuff. Oh, we accumulate stuff so easily. And it is so, you know, when you're a stitcher like this and you love it, you're passionate about it, there's so many patterns coming out all the time. It's hard to resist, and you guys know this. I'm not, you know, I'm preaching to the choir. I know this. The conundrum is, you know, at some point here, in the not too distant future, possibly as soon as 5 years, we want to go out on the road full time. And I dearly want to do that. I love traveling. I love being out in the RV and seeing, you know, basically this continent, because once we go, you know, we're not limited by borders. Hopefully we won't be limited by borders at that point. Let me count here. Hold on. I'm here. I need to go 1, 2, 3, 4 down. So, you know, Canada, Mexico. Heck, I think there's even ferries that can take RVs off across to South America. You know, so we're going to be serious travelers. But that means, you know, one thing I was thinking about a lot when we were on this trip to Connecticut is not just the containers of, the bins of yarn, the bins of patterns, the bins of fabric, not just that, but also all my completed things. Harbor Haven, I'm not going to put Harbor Haven in storage. Harbor Haven needs to hang wherever I live. So, we're going to have to figure out a way. And, it's not like there's no walls in the RV, but there's not a lot of walls in an RV. And certainly with some of the walls moving, because we have slides that close up when we're actually on the road and open up when we're established in a campsite someplace. It's not easy to find space to hang things. And then you have to worry about, it has to be hung pretty darn secure, because as I've mentioned before, some of the roads out there are so bad. Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot, not just the stuff that's still incompleted, but the stuff that I've finished. And I guess what I'll probably have to do is have a small bin of all the different seasonal stuff, whether it's the pillows in a bowl, little dough bowl type of idea, or just small things that I can hang and change out. And that's kind of the trend anyways, I know. But, when I say I want to stitch all the things, then the next question is, well, Jan, where are you going to put all the things? Because we're going to be hitting the road in the not too distant future. So it's a different dilemma than most people have. Even people that downsize don't have to worry too much about where they're going to hang everything. I mean, yeah, you run out of wall space eventually, but this is to an even greater degree. So it's no wonder my head hurts. I've had a headache for the past 2 days. I've had, I think, probably a pinched nerve in my back that's caused pain in my right arm. Tamara right now is saying, well, yeah, at least you can still use your right arm. You'll get there, Tamara, and you'll be a bionic woman at that point. Right? So, yeah. Life. Let's see, what else is happening? We've been watching a series on Amazon called Jack Ryan, based on the Tom Clancy books with Jack Ryan. It's kind of the same idea, but different. We love those kind of action, and of course it involves spy work and that kind of thing, so we can relate to that a bit. Speaking of spy work, not really spy work, but kind of, sort of. So we just passed by the 17th anniversary of 9/11, and it's actually really, really hard to believe that it's been 17 years. And of course, the Facebook is filled with salutes and tributes and memories. Some of you may know there is a Broadway show called Not From Here that is the story of all the planes who got diverted to the little town in Nova Scotia called Gander, and how this town just really took all these travelers in. I think the little thing I read yesterday, my friend, one of my friends from Canada, one of the gals who's one of our snowbirds down in Florida at the yarn store, Sue Mitchell, posted, and I had never read this before, even after all these years, posted the story, I think from the viewpoint of, I know there's a passenger, I think one of the actually flight attendants on a flight, a Delta flight from Frankfurt, that is one of the flights that got diverted. I had never read it before. We purposely didn't go to see that Broadway play when we were up there because Mike and I still have a really hard time handling these memories, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But I read that account, and yeah, I lost it. I totally lost it, which I know isn't hard to believe because as you guys well know now, I lose it over commercials. But yeah, side note, you can see I'm putting my forefinger, it's starting to hurt from being up here, and I just flip it down under, and that becomes the one that I bounce the needle off of. It's not quite as comfortable because I like having this up here, the thumb and the forefinger, to kind of keep the fabric steady and stable, so putting it under here kind of loses that a bit, but that's okay. I can work with it. So anyways, the reason we still have a hard time dealing it, we only just watched Flight 93, the movie Flight 93 last year, and we still didn't handle it very well. We were both at work at NSA on September 11th, 2001. NSA is located maybe 5 miles down the parkway from BWI Airport. And of course, you know, we play CNN all day in the office, and so we knew what was happening. Some people say we should have known earlier, and this is very true, and we won't go there. But, so pretty much work stopped, and we were all glued to the TVs watching what was happening. And when the plane hit the Pentagon, to say we started to freak out is an understatement. We are in a direct line from BWI, from Washington. We are a major government agency that you would think would have a big red target on it because of what we do. I've never been as scared for my life as I was that day. We were watching for planes coming. The agency did evacuate, and we went home probably by 11. We were out of there, and we were home. Now, the funny part of this story, so yeah, I have a hard time even now thinking about what happened that day. But the funny part of that story is Mike's parents were visiting us at the time. And they had gone down to D.C. They are big zoo lovers. They go into San Diego all the time, like probably once every month or two, to go to the San Diego Zoo and to go to the Wild Animal Park. They love the zoos. So they were down at the National Zoo that day. We tried to get in touch with them to tell them to get home. And, of course, the cell towers were just totally jammed. Nothing was getting through. We couldn't reach them. They eventually wandered in, probably about, 2 o'clock or so. And they're like, "What are you guys doing home?" They had no idea. Their cells probably weren't even on. They were probably looking at some additional police or whatever activity and not really thinking, "Oh, who knows, it's DC, stuff happens." So it's like, where have you guys been? Don't you know what happened? Oh my goodness. We were panicking, but they were like, "Oh yeah, what, we had no idea. We were just enjoying the zoo." So anyways, 9/11, we have gone to the memorial in New York at the Twin Towers, and they've done a beautiful job. It's hard to step back from it all, though. But anyway, here we are 17 years later. Hard to believe. All right, guys. I'm going to get down here to this corner. I hope you found this useful. Like I said, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And if you need me to show anything again, I hope this was close up enough for you to see. Making sure I'm in the line here where it ends. If you need me to show something in a different angle, a different way, I will do my best to do that. But I hope this was helpful. And on that note, there's little Woolemina. She's a pretty gal. She's going to be even prettier with all these pinks around her once all these flowers are done. Pretty, pretty. Alrighty, I will talk to you later. You guys have a great day. For those of you in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, stay safe. And I will be keeping you in my thoughts and prayers. Take care.